Gary, thanks for being here. I'll kick off with a quick intro for those of you who don't know Gary. So,
Cool.
Gary is currently the director of the International AWS Alliance team at OWN, formerly known as OWN Backup. Before OWN, Gary was at AWS, where he spent 5 years, most recently heading up partner coastal programs across the EMEA region. He was instrumental and he developed the AWS Partner Co-Sell program, ACE, in EMEA. And he deeply advocates, I can attest to that, for data-driven partnerships and co-selling at scale. He lives in UK with his wife and his 2-year-old daughter, and they have a cockapoo called Skipper. So, Gary, very excited to have you here. Welcome. If you want to do a quick intro, just add on to what I just said. It'll be helpful for people
No,
to know who we're talking to.
thanks, Vinny, and then thanks for having us here. So it's great to be part of these conversations. I really enjoyed that the intro conversation with Nina. Certainly took some learnings from that. But you hit most of the key salient points there from why we're having this conversation today. I head up the alliances for OWN for our team international. I was at AWS for a fair few years, predominantly working in co-sell programs and partner alignment. So I've got a point of view that I've brought 2 inches to the other side of the fence, working as a partner now and working with a number of those programs and functions at AWS. So looking forward to the conversation today. My evening, your morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gary. I know it's a little bit late UK time. So let's dive in. I know you have been a very strong practitioner, and as you work with the AWS ecosystem, and you have been a keynote speaker at many of their conferences because you have that unique perspective where you've been there at AWS and now you're building the same at OWN. As you build that journey at OWN, can you talk a little bit about how co-sell and marketplace are important today?
Absolutely. So what we're doing here, co-sell and marketplace are kind of front and center and foundational to our next stage of growth. But before I unpack, it's kind of interesting to look at the question for a second. Why is co-sell and marketplace important? The fact that they're two distinct questions within a question kind of talks to where we are today with the evolution of co-sell and marketplaces.
Mhm.
If we had asked that question a year or so ago, it would have been two distinct questions.
Right.
Why are you co-selling and what benefits do you have and how do you interact with marketplace? And I'm pretty sure a year from now, if we ask a question, it'll be a lot more consolidated in terms of marketplaces being very fundamental to the whole co-sell process. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we bring marketplace as kind of assumptive part of that whole co-sell. So that was just a little consideration when I saw the question. It's kind of interesting that the direction of travel is going that way. We're right in the middle of it. But for OWN, co-seller marketplace is really, really front and center. It's not just for us. We see it as a customer-driven kind of sea change in the industry. There's some great data points that are being launched at the moment. I know Forrester have recently said that marketplaces, for example, are increasing average selling prices by 80%, reducing time to close by around 40%, and the win rates are up by 27%. And I was really interested to hear Amit at the beginning of this session talking about the Canalys view that over the next 5 years, third-party software and services like OWN are going to account for 45 billion through marketplaces. So that's about 84% annual increase in growth through marketplaces in the next 5 years or so. So there's a huge evolution of how customers like to buy. And we want to make sure that we're primed to take full advantage of that and have that central to our strategy. So for OWN, we've seen kind of a localized version of some of that growth metrics. We've seen for ourselves in the EMEA region for our AWS alignment an increase of 730% in marketplace total contract value, 271% increase in our launch co-sell revenue in ACE. And by all the measurable metrics that ACE look at us and AWS look at us in terms of a partner, we are exceeding and accelerating past those at quite a clip. I won't go into what those are, but we've got 6 categories of goals. The least one we're about 130%, and the highest one are about 271%. So in terms of the acceleration that we're seeing, because of co-seller marketplace is really been pronounced in terms of what we need to be able to scale into our next stage of growth. If you'll indulge me, Puneet, what I'd love to do is walk you through a recent customer use case to kind of highlight how we co-sell and where marketplace comes into that as kind of indicative of what's bred some of that success.
Yeah, absolutely. The customer example will make it even more real. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take a couple of minutes. I won't go too deep into it, but it was a large enterprise manufacturing customer that we were working with. In no way an isolated incident. This is quite representative of how we co-sell with AWS. But our team, as always, have done a fantastic job in aligning with the stakeholders that we would generally speak to around the own service, 3 key platforms: Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Dynamics CRM. We provide a suite of security tools and platforms for that, for certain resilience and data compliance needs. So we were working with the Center of Excellence and the CRM owners around that. It's very quickly identified that our solution met the challenges of their business. Largely that was around concerns around business continuity if they had any kind of data issues in the platform. So from a technical standpoint, we had ticked all the boxes. They weren't really sure how they were going to pay for it. From a funding perspective, where's the budget coming from? They didn't have a line of sight on that. And as such, we didn't have a line of sight to our path to close. So as is with our process that we've built with integration with WorkSpan, an opportunity was generated into ACE, which is the AWS co-sell platform, very quickly validated by their excellent EMEA ACE validation team. And it comes back to us with some wealth of insights. So we immediately get to see all of the account team that's supporting that customer, the account manager, other sales personas, if it's a large account, as this was, the partner sales representative, the ISV sales representative. So we have a plethora of people that we could reach out to connect to co-sell. We didn't reach out straight away, as we often don't. We like to do some further analysis within ACE. There's some insight that we can gain called propensity to buy analysis. Gives us a view whether the customer that we're aligned with is has a high propensity, as the name suggests, weighted score from 1 to 5, if they would have a high propensity to see value in having a marketplace conversation. AWS doesn't give us the secret sauce that's under the hood in the algorithm. It's kind of like the Colonel's 11 spices, but you can make certain assumptions there. So if they're high on that list, which this customer was, they're likely to have committed spend with AWS and EDP. They're likely to understand the marketplace proposition or even have a marketplace first approach and strategy. So knowing that, we can then trigger the next stage of our co-sell engagement, an invite to the account manager to align with our sellers. And we would then prime them with more information around what the pain point of the customer was, what our solution is we're providing, the point in the sales cycle we're at, and what the asks we need from the seller. So once we come into that call, we are very much connected, aligned, right, full of insight. And what we find is often the case, and why co-sell is so valuable when the marketplace comes straight into that co-sell engagement, is on that first call, we did some stakeholder mapping, because what we generally find is we're speaking to a different area of business than the AWS reps. They have a higher level engagement, usually understanding the direction of travel, digital transformation, priorities, the security concerns and all that kind of stuff, but also their budget. So they helped us walk around some of those key stakeholders, give some more light on the budgetary concerns they had, and agreed that marketplace was the right approach. This customer was trying to look at consolidation of SaaS vendors through the marketplace, so that's very much ticked the boxes there. So coming out of that call, there were some great actions. The seller went into the procurement team of our customer without us. They had a meeting the next week for other matters. In that meeting, they also advocated our solution, which gives us credibility working alongside their key trusted advisor. They educated those teams in terms of how it would be beneficial to purchase this product they didn't have budget for through the marketplace, offsetting pre-committed spend and being part of their consolidation strategy. But also in unison to that, they had the AWS Marketplace customer advisors go into the customer and join the dots in terms of the buying teams. The guys and girls that understood the constructs of AWS and Marketplace self-educating the buying team that weren't familiar, justifying the value of buying our products through the marketplace. So we didn't even have to go to the customer with that. So anyway, long story short is going from an opportunity where we had no line of sight in terms of the close path or the budget, that accelerated to closing out in 3 weeks. And it's the scenario that really kind of amplifies the value of co-seller marketplace, because there's clear value in each of the camps. For the customer, they got their consolidation strategy met. They got to use pre-aligned committed spend to AWS. They had service credits that the account manager provided to accelerate this, that they can use to offset other spends at AWS. We love that because we don't have to pay for that. That comes from AWS. And they've now got a tried and tested procurement path for other upsells, cross-sells for the team that we're working in. Us as a partner have huge value in terms of acceleration, in terms of getting funding for our customer. We now have fantastic relationships with those teams to take our proposition into wider teams. And the AWS team found value in retirement of quota, certain spiffs. They're advocating for a solution to their customer that they can't provide. We're very complementary and non-competitive. So they're adding value to customer obsession there. And they're cementing their place as a trusted advisor, bringing the right solution for a challenge they had further down the stack that some of their high-level stakeholders weren't familiar with. So that's a very long way of saying bringing co-seller marketplace in as a strategy is one of those equations that's absolutely opposite of a zero-sum game. We've got 1 + 1 + 1 equals 11 in terms of the amount of value. So, yeah, I think you can tell from my expressive there that we find a lot of value in co-seller marketplace.
Yeah, Gary, I see a lot of passion, and I think you started off with the numbers, which were phenomenal, and then you took it to the next level by giving that customer example. And what we are seeing is similar patterns. So let me build upon that question, because that seems to be part of like a big strategy on how you accelerated co-sell. So let's just talk about that. When you came along and you set this team and Owen's team for success for co-sell, how did you accelerate that journey?
Yeah, thanks, Puneet. I mean, coming with a certain point of view from AWS, and I'm going to speak specifically to our EMEA practice here, and maybe just to set the state of the partnership. Own is a US headquartered company. We're technically founded out of Tel Aviv. We've got a headquarters in New Jersey. And as we're developing and establishing our AWS relationship over the last 6 years, our partner team has been based in North America. So our partner development managers, our marketplace development managers, our solution architects on the AWS side, partner marketing manager, which is fantastic, doing great work over there. As I'm sure many of us on this audience will agree, the line of sight across the Atlantic can be relatively cloudy in terms of understanding the nuances and intricacies of the EMEA market, and be able to establish a go-to-market in EMEA from the States can be challenging. So I came on board last July to figure that out, to build out the go-to-market for EMEA and build out the strategy to get this co-sell really ramped up. So we're talking kind of in about a 1.5 year range here, the success that we've seen. And the first thing that we needed to do back then, when we didn't have any representation on the AWS side, is understand our priorities. So we looked at 3 things I talk about to answer this question. First, what were the foundational goals that we set for ourselves and the stepping stones that would take us from where we were to where we wanted to be? And we'll talk about those in terms of the high-level buckets in a second. Secondary is, what are the goals that we gave ourselves internally to show the value back to the business in language they understand in terms of revenue and opportunities? And then thirdly, which can't be minimized, is how and why did we get the buy-in and how do we evangelize the value to the business so that we had the leadership and sales organization behind our strategy? Because you can have the best alliance, partnerships, channel function in the world, but if it doesn't resonate with the wider teams, it's going to be pushing on a closed door. Just to run through those 3 points, the first being, I think the most important, is our direction of travel. What is our priorities in terms of our foundational goals? And I look at it in 3 areas: visibility, peerage, and activation. And visibility is the bit that kind of informed the heading of this conversation, is data-driven and programmatic partnerships. So what I see as visibility is having our data propagate the own capabilities across the AWS organization, telling our story with data. And I'll come back to how we did that in a second. The second is peerage, building out our respective team at AWS to have headcounts within AWS that have a vested interest in own success, and how do we get them? And then that leads on to the third piece, which is more around execution. We call it activation, is once we've built up that credibility and alignment, how do we activate the team to build out specific go-to-markets in the areas that we should be, and where it resonates. So that visibility piece in terms of data telling our story, foundationally, that's ACE, right? So ACE is a platform for us to co-sell, but it's also a platform to gather data over time. So putting my old hat on, advocating ACE to other partners, some of the opinions that partners would have about ACE, and I understand why they have it to a certain degree, is it's an admin overhead. Mm-hmm. It's really burdensome in terms of burning my resources to maintain. And I'm only doing it because a partner manager says I have to do it to maintain tier compliance. Now, the partners that get it, and I put ourselves in the camp, see it as a strategic differentiator for your partner practice. Some of the key value levers of ACE is, one, we get strategic acceleration through alignment with the right stakeholders in the AWS business, as I talked about in that earlier example. Fantastic, huge value there. Two, we can have financial acceleration through funding in those opportunities. Great, they can really accelerate opportunities in their sales cycle. But they're kind of individual values that come into the opportunity. The bit that's often overlooked is it's the platform that allows you to evangelize your capabilities at scale. So this is what I'm talking about, a data-driven alignment with AWS. You should be registering every opportunity in the platforms, whether you need co-sell support or not. Mm-hmm. We often do, because that's the way that we're structured with those different stakeholder alignments and so forth. But even if you can run that sales cycle yourself, put it in for visibility only, because over time, those opportunities and data will paint a picture of the shape and sound of the customer that you care about. The opportunities that you're sourcing, co-selling, aligning with, and winning is going to tell where you resonate in a region, a geography, a size segmentation, a vertical, and a use case. And that starts to inform the AWS business.
Right.
If you think about it, AWS has tens of thousands of sellers.
Yeah.
They've got 250 plus products and services they need to think about. They've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of partners that they need to consider. They can only down select who they're going to align with based on evidence. And that data is our evidence. So it starts to show where we resonate. Nina said success breeds success. I completely agree. If we can evidence success in financial services in the UK in the enterprise sector, sure as hell they're going to pick up the phone when we call them, so we've got another opportunity in that sector. So that's that visibility piece. Once we've got a solid foundation there, that leads directly into the peerage piece. If we're asking for a partner development extension manager, PDM, to be my counterpoint to develop a go-to-market for EMEA, who's responsible for the deliverables and the outcomes, the first question I'm going to be asked is, why should you have one? We've only got X amount of resource. They only manage a finite amount of partners. The data justifies the ask. And that's why we've gone from 0 to 5 in a year. We've got a PDME, public sector PDM. We've got our marketplace development managers. We've got an ISM and ISV success manager for public sector across EMEA. And in the UKI, our primary market, we've been elevated to what they see as a primary go-to-market partner because the data tells the right story.
Right.
And then all of that leads to the third bucket, activation. We could be more specific on where we want to engage now. So if we come in cold and try and do lunch and learns and account mappings and door knocking, you can only have isolated success. If the data is telling you where to place your chips, as we do, we only have a few resources ourselves, but the data is telling us we should be establishing campaigns, activities with the manufacturing team in Germany, we're informed.
Yeah.
So that's our high direction of travel goals. Very quickly, the internal goals that we look at, we've slightly changed for hyperscale partners such as AWS. In our ecosystem partners such as Salesforce, one of our closest partners, arguably our biggest sourcing partners, as with our resellers, ISVs, and so forth, the biggest metric we have is source revenue. The point of origin is coming from the partner. With AWS, we've changed the metrics because the biggest value that we see that have at this point of our journey with them is influence revenue. So how are they helping us support the successful fruition of deals? And we've got co-sell revenue and sell-through revenue with marketplaces because we want to amplify that in terms of success.
Right. I think that's phenomenal, right? Like a lot of people come from the old partnering world where it was all about presence, and presence was a lot of times physical presence, but you have completely shifted the paradigm. And what you're saying is for large organizations like an Amazon, where you have to create visibility for hundreds of thousands and you have to start building a parallel team. I think that's phenomenal that you are able to build, replicate, or mirror your team to that team. So now that team has vested interest in your success. I think that's phenomenal success. And that to me is truly unique. A lot of companies, I think, trip up on that. So you have done that successfully. So kudos to you. You and I have chatted for the last several months now, how WorkSpan has helped you in that journey. And this will be my last question because I want to keep an eye on the clock. How are you able to take that programmatic approach with WorkSpan as you thought about creating that big presence in the Amazon team using that data-driven approach?
It wouldn't be possible without integration, is my view. Before we had WorkSpan plugged in, I was burning nearly all of my resources just in opportunity generation and maintenance. One of my team was spending 60% of her time registering, managing, and aligning on opportunity. So just the sheer automation of the integration between our platforms is a huge step forward in terms of what we can do with the resources to drive value. The other piece that I'm really interested in, and we've been talking about a lot recently, is the actionable insights that we can get from the reporting that you're building for us around that data. So coming back from that visibility piece, data-driven insights coming through to what we care about really, which is the activation and execution. We want that insight, and WorkSpan starting to be able to division that from where opportunities are landing geographically, where they're landing from size segmentation, velocity of close, all of that kind of good stuff, so it can start to inform our decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that's phenomenal. And you've been a great partner. I know we are going to run a little bit tight on time. So we do have an exciting announcement to make, especially that you talked about the marketplace and co-sell, how it has kind of become one and it has become important. So Chip, if you don't mind sharing the slide. So this is exciting for us, Gary. Like you were saying, right? The importance of marketplace, how they have become strategic for enterprise sales, not just from a procurement perspective, from a propensity to buy, how you're going to go construct that deal. So we saw that, and keeping in line with that approach, I'm very happy to announce today that we are offering customers early access to our full suite of like hyperscaler offerings. So this offering combines co-sell and marketplace into one. WorkSpan will enable a partner like you to manage both co-sell and private offers in their own native environment, which is the Salesforce environment. I think this is phenomenal because it greatly simplifies the burden that you have, especially with constrained resources in this macro. So across teams, as you look at sales team, if you look at finance teams, alliance teams, operations, all four teams get impacted in some way, shape, or form. And by offering this solution, we are bringing it all together seamlessly in an integrated manner and in a turnkey way, which is fully automated. So I'm very excited about that. And then as part of this conference, if you go to the next slide, Chip, we are also giving an attractive promotion. So companies can join our early access program where they can get discounts up to 20% on your first year subscription. We have limited slots available, but this I think is going to be phenomenal in terms of the impact it creates. With our offering, we also take a differentiated approach to the business model. There's no vendor lock-in. You own your marketplace listing. You can do anything with it once we have put you up on the marketplace. And then our software is scalable. We manage heavy volume on the co-sell side. We're going to do the same on the marketplace side. And what you have to do, you simply scan this QR code and you can talk to one of our sales reps. So I'm very excited about that. I wanted to announce it before we take any questions. Chip, why don't we come in and see if there are any questions for Gary, especially as he has some unique perspective, having worked both sides.
Yeah, thanks. This is a great session, Gary. Thank you. Gosh, you are just a wealth of knowledge and data. The numbers you're throwing out are just incredible. Really, really appreciate it. And just it really comes through. So thank you. Yeah, I think a couple of good questions here. One that I thought was interesting is this one from Sanjay Advani. Impressive stats and storyline, Gary. Would be curious to learn whether the EMEA co-sell results for OWN and others outshine the US, despite the teams being US based. That's been my experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually. Yeah, it fluctuates from time to time. Over the beginning part of this year, we actually saw that we accounted for 70% at the time of the overall marketplace total contract value globally coming through the EMEA region. I think what we find, especially in the establishing years, we've been a AWS partner for the last 4 or 5 years, but we've really had a go-to-market in anger in AWS EMEA for the last year and a half or two, is we are a little more connected in terms of the stakeholders we have there. And when we have a message like this co-sell and marketplace strategy in play, we've been able to turn it on incredibly quickly. So we've seen 56%, I think, at last check, of the global opportunities through ACE were sat in EMEA, and 70% of the revenues of total contract value of marketplace in the first half of this year were through EMEA. So to answer your question, yeah, we've seen the same.
Great. This was an interesting one that just came up from Colin Huff. Great insights, Gary. We are in the early days of our partnership with AWS. What's a realistic goal for POs versus AOs in the first 2 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One we hear, or I would
but just the definition in case. So POs and AOs are partner originated and AWS originated.
Yeah. So the expectation or hope from a lot of partners is once you become aligned with AWS, the tap for AOs will turn on and they will just start pouring through. But I couldn't agree with Nina more on the success breeds success here in terms of getting that flow all started. So my advice, and I think it's kind of evidence in our strategy, is get these partner originated opportunities flowing into the system. You want everything in there in terms of data, because that buys your cost of entry to the teams within AWS to understand your capabilities. Once they understand with data where your proposition sits in terms of the vertical customer and use case, that's when the AOs will start opening up. They know that you are a solid value add to their proposition, especially if it's going through the marketplace, especially if it's hitting their back pocket in terms of spiffs and in quota retirement. That's when those AOs start coming back to you. But in all reality, AWS isn't really an opportunity generating machine, as much as this is why we weighted our metrics more to influence and sell through than the AO, which is partner sourced. But to summarize that, focus on the POs to prove your practice. The AOs will come.
Terrific. Awesome. Maybe one last quick question from Michael Mantis. What support resources does WorkSpan provide to help with the platform onboarding and integration between WorkSpan platform and CSP?
Is that better for you, Puneet, or for us? I mean, we've had.
Why don't we go the customer lens, Gary? You tell us how you were supportive.
We've had a wealth of support from WorkSpan, and what I've really liked is they've constantly evolved to service any challenges that we've had. So we've had a great team around us as we had the integration onboarded, and we've had some teams come alongside us more recently to build some operational rigor with us to help us streamline some things out, and additional resources coming in to one of our asks that we had to support us in more data and insights. So I think the summary of that question in terms of my response is they're listening, and they're responding very quickly when we have an ask.
That's phenomenal, Gary. Great validation from someone like you, who I respect a ton in terms of as a practitioner. So thank you for those kind words. We really appreciate the partnership.
Thank you, and enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gary. This is fantastic. Really appreciate you joining and sharing your insights and numbers.
Gary, thanks for staying up late. We appreciate it.